Charles, hello.
Hey there, Jason. It's good to be here somewhere in Manhattan with a helicopter right above us for good measure.
Yeah, it just flew off. You know, I was over here earlier, Charles. I did an earlier stream. I don't know if you've seen this. This is a pretty elaborate setup, like windows and everything.
Right.
But, you know, I think I mentioned to you that some Black Lives Matter, I don't want to call them protesters because they were
hooligans?
not engaged in a protest. They were in an unlawful assembly, but they smashed my lens on my camera phone, and I brought it over to the Rossman Repair Group earlier for repair.
Good. You think that repair is finished?
They said it would take only an hour. It's amazing. I really have to say I admire this guy, Louis Rossman, because fixing things, that's a good business in my mind. You know, it's something that people have moved away from and just throw stuff out and buy a new one.
Yeah.
But maybe perhaps people will start.
But there are some things that can't be fixed, Jason. One of them would be Joe Biden.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I don't know. Charles, look at all the graffiti over here. It's really, this is not the way this neighborhood ever was.
Yeah, it's a kind of, you really want to reach into your pocket and pay more to live around here to see this. What did this used to be? Because this used to be a fast food restaurant.
This was a deli.
It was a Lenwich, wasn't it?
I don't think this was Lenny's over here, but it was a pretty upscale kind of lunch place. And now,
not around here.
Now it's a disaster.
Yeah. I mean, this is really shocking to me. This is in worse shape than I remember this area being in the 80s.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, in the 80s. And look at this.
Yeah. And I mean, you know, Rossman Repair just moved over here a few months ago. Louis does a lot of YouTube videos going around talking about real estate
and kickboxing.
I don't know if he's doing kickboxing, but he is right over there, 141.
Is that where you learned your technique?
I don't think so. But it wouldn't be a bad idea to know how to kickbox some people.
Exactly.
I put out a video earlier, Charles, about the dismissal of Steele v. Goodman, something I'm quite pleased about. Now, wait a minute, it looks closed now, but it's supposed to be open until 4.
Huh.
Let's see.
Yeah, it looks, I don't know which one it is, but.
So Charles, this will be your first production assignment. I'm going to hand you this thing while I walk in.
And what am I supposed to do, just stand here?
You could just stand there and
talk to it?
Kind of.
Jason is in the building.
I'll be in there talking to Louis, picking up the phone. Oh, wait.
That looks impressive.
Okay,
so Jason is in this repair place, which is in the heart of Manhattan. We're on 27th Street, I think, between 6th and 7th Avenue, which is, for a while, became a very popular part with young couples. There are a lot of modern apartment buildings and repurposed apartment buildings, both rental and loft. There were a ton of good restaurants, and so many of those restaurants have shut down. So many people have moved out. You see the condition on the street with the graffiti and the dirt. People are rushing away from here. And at the end of the block, that's the Fashion Institute of Technology, which normally is a beehive of activity. It's a world-famous institution. But of course, in the pandemic, we don't have the same level of energy and activity. So we're going to walk around today after Jason gets done with this errand. We're going to walk around and look at some of the places that we haven't been to before, and as well as some of a few that we have seen before. We got a busy week ahead. We'll talk once Jason gets back about the developments with Durham and other developments that suggest we're going to have really a wild week coming up. I know that many of you have been watching or following some of the work that I do with Katya Blainova on Sputnik. Katerina Blainova, she goes by Katya. She has done with me, I'd say over 100 interviews since May of 2016, where she would pose questions and I would attempt answers. And she doesn't just put the question up in the answer, she then weaves in other opinions and other facts and other analysis. And this is now quite a series that chronicles the evolution of the first campaign and the questions people had about what might happen, chronicles the post-election mayhem, and then the efforts by the deep state to unseat the Trump administration. We also weave in and out various other economic topics, including ideas for China, ideas for the Middle East and Iran and other conflict points. So it's quite a lengthy group of articles. We've got another one. One came out, I think, just today. We'll have about one a week through the election, if not more, on average. And then, in addition to that, I got an opportunity to do a similar, forgive the noise, a similar approach with something called the Tehran Times. They sent me a bunch of questions to try to answer, and I attempted the answers. They'll publish it this week, I think, the answers in my first interview with them. Then I also have written for the American Thinker a number of different pieces. I did one last week. That's where I advised the president really just not to waste any time trying to do a presidential library. The reason for that is the second that he intertwines a not-for-profit, a new not-for-profit, with his post-presidency, whether that's coming in January or 4 years from January, you're going to have all of the naysayers after him saying that he's deriving illegal benefits through the operation of this presidential library, when indeed it would be, I think, a lot simpler for the Trump presidential papers, that is to say the records of the 4 years or 8 years, stay in the National Archives building itself, the one in Washington, D.C., or if there's spare capacity in another building, so that we don't waste money, and so that the Trump family remains very free to do whatever they want going forward. So here he is.
Charles, that was
horrible.
Outstanding camera work, pointing at the ground the whole time.
Was I really? I don't know what
That's
I'm
okay.
doing.
Totally fine.
Well, you didn't tell me that there's an
That's
option.
all right. I thought we might be looking inside there and there might be a conversation, but that there was another woman in there doing something with her computer or whatever.
That's why you do the camera and I don't.
Well, I thought it might be more interesting interaction in there, but nothing happened, so it was fine. But it was cool to be able to pick that up and save some time now.
Good.
Anyway, I heard that you were talking about Durham and sort of prepping everybody for what we're going to discuss today. What's going on with Durham? I heard that he's not going to indict anybody before the election.
Well, so what happened a week ago, there was a lot of chatter. I think Mike Moore had a piece saying that nothing's going to happen. And then, frankly, unexpectedly, on Thursday of last week in the New York Times, online, then Friday in the print, big story, confirming that Durham has been investigating the Clinton Foundation for who knows how long, but for a protracted period of time. Basically taking up after Huber, the U.S. attorney in Utah, apparently came up with bupkis. And what I would say to people is, if you are a subscriber to the theory that the Clintons are almighty, there's Clintons up here, Satan, and then God below, then maybe you believe, there's no point in doing anything. We shouldn't go to work.
Breakfast at Tiffany's with golf, Charles.
Good. Sounds like a plan.
Shouldn't go to work.
Shouldn't go to work. You shouldn't do anything. Just pick your poison, drugs, alcohol, both,
wait
and
for
just
the,
wait for the
government check and go riot, spray paint
Right.
the neighborhood.
But if, on the other hand, you have confidence that Durham has a team, has integrity, understands the law, has put people in prison, powerful people in both political parties, then you train your eyes on the public record, which is out there for everybody to see. Now, we have done, this is now, I think, our 265th video. There are literally thousands of pages of evidence out there in the public domain. Is that your car?
No, but that is, I saw that earlier. Sorry.
It's okay. So there are literally thousands of pages that we put out, hundreds of hours of video analysis. We've tried to make it simple for prosecutors to do their job. And now we must wait and see whether they really have the guts to do what they should do, and it's very simple.
Well, also that they're not being obstructed by the higher ups. That seems to be an ongoing problem.
Right. There's an excellent piece retweeted today, Paul Sperry, Real Clear Investigations. It's 2 years old, the piece, but it talks about how James Comey lied his ass off, which is, hey, there's a shock, when he said that after they uncovered the Abedin laptop, he said that through the wizardry of the FBI, they were able in a short period to go through, then they claimed 300,000 emails.
I think that's in the movie too, the Comey whatever movie.
Well, the truth is that the number of emails uncovered then was 694,000. Wow. And most importantly, a large number of these emails covered the period 2007 through 2009, which is precisely the period where any real investigator who understands charities and accounting would look and see that the fraud had metastasized and was untreatable. And so what they had to do is come up with a series of ruses. They had to re-jiggle it like one of those three-card Monte card players. They had to create a whole bunch of
that
new...
sounds like the FBI.
Right. And so, but this is precisely a period that would be very illuminating and also encompasses the period when John Glasgow mysteriously disappeared and ultimately, many years later, was found dead, likely murdered.
So when did he disappear? Because it was 8 years or something until they found him, right?
He disappeared in January, late in January 2008, just as Hillary was losing, just as Hillary's cash was falling out of her pockets and burning cash like crazy. Late in January 2008, and I've written articles about this that are still out there, he disappears, even though, let's go that way. Even though, unless you want to go that way.
I don't mind. That's like the weed club over there since earlier.
Which one?
Those guys in the island were...
Oh, is that weed?
Well, not right now, but earlier they were totally smoking out over there.
Is that right?
Yeah.
So, what happened was, when you go into the accounting, which we'll talk about in a second, the period of 2006 and afterwards was a period where the Clinton Foundation and their, in quotes, professional advisors, their lawyers and accountants decided, F the rules, F everything, we're going to win in 2008, and we're going to get away with whatever we want to do. So let's just not even bother to try to comply with the rules. And the problem with that, people following this have to look through a lot of context to see the relevance of some of the key disclosures. When the Clinton Foundation began its work actually constructing the Little Rock complex, that was in May of 2002, at a time when Little Rock was very depressed. So the value of the contract that had been entered into to construct the complex was gigantic. It was one of the largest single contracts ever let out in Little Rock. And if you have the viewers who have any experience with construction understand that as a construction company, you don't necessarily want to take on a gigantic deal because you may not have the credit to purchase the materials that need to be purchased and pay the labor that needs to be paid before your bill gets paid.
You can get put into kind of a
cash bind.
Right.
So in boom times, what what contractors often will do is they will bargain with the client and they'll say, listen, I want a large down payment before I do any work.
Right.
And that way they're always in the money. They're never facing credit risk. So if you were a sensible contracting firm, and this is a very large contracting firm, CDI, a joint venture with Dillard's department store people and a wealthy family in Little Rock that had experience, what you would care about, first of all, is are your bills going to get paid?
Right.
You wouldn't just want the honor of spending the most money anyone has ever spent in Little Rock.
Because the Dillard guy was pretty rich himself,
They both were very rich, both sides of the equation. So the notion that you would say, all right, I'm going to do this work for a public charity that's never been audited, doesn't believe in filing its tax returns, isn't registered, hasn't done its paperwork.
And already owes their own lawyers millions of dollars.
Right. And has been sanctioned by the state of Mississippi 3 times. His chief fundraiser has been sanctioned by Pennsylvania. And at the time, Bill Clinton was not exactly flavor of the month in 2002, having being the subject of a large FBI investigation.
What could possibly go wrong, Charles?
Right, just about everything. So on this, the idea that John Glasgow, who was apparently he was the top financial officer of the contracting firm,
CFO, right?
Chief Financial Officer, yeah, that he would absolutely have been the one to review whether the payments were being made, what did the total value of the construction end up being, how much of it needed to be billed after the fact to the Clintons, how long did it take to get collected, what was the financial structure. Yeah, he would be asking all these type of questions because it would fall to him if there was a problem.
Right.
So clearly, when you look through, and this is a note to Mr. Durham, and people who follow the show, feel free to you can contact him by email. I think his email address is a matter of public record.
Is it?
Absolutely. All U.S. attorneys. And
here's just a lone dog walking around.
A hot dog. I think that's the lady's dog. But anyway, what are you thinking, lunch?
No, I'm thinking...
So the notion that the FBI and the Department of Justice and the IRS will be able to pass off the work product here as finished if they don't take apart the audit, in quotes, the BKD put together on June 9th, 2006 for 2004 and 2005, the notion that they will just give this thing a pass and not address that is impossible. You have to go back. It's the Clinton Foundation financials that are going to be put together this year by November 15th, 2020 for 2019 rest on the first year of operation, which was completed December 31st, 1997. If the first year is wrong, every subsequent year is wrong.
But it's been wrong every year.
I know, and so the question is, will the authorities actually do something about it? What we heard in the story in the New York Times is that Durham is indeed investigating, and this gentleman, Adam Housley, who used to work for Fox, has been tweeting on and on. Apparently he's got some source who is claiming that what Durham has been focused upon is exactly the exercise we've done in show after show, where we take a given country and we say, okay, Australia said beginning in 2006 that it started sending money to the Clinton Foundation. Let's see if there's any entry for government grants in the 990 for 2006, and there isn't. Let's see if there's any entry in the New York State filing, which is supposed to give you details on that, and there isn't. Let's look in California, where you have the same requirement for specific disclosures, and it's not there either. So in theory, Durham is following that trail, and also in theory, Durham has locked onto Jim Comey. And the reason, yes, and I think the Paul Sperry revelations of 2018, let's go that way over to 8th maybe?
Sure.
So we're off the 23rd. And it is that in 2001, in February of 2001, when the FBI really leapt in the Justice Department under Mary Jo White in the Southern District, they jumped all over the Clintons, both of them. They tagged them, identified them specifically as targets of a criminal investigation for white-collar crime. And you can see this on the FBI vault file for William J. Clinton Foundation, Part 3. You see the actual, we've done shows on it, but you can see they were Hillary was specifically named. She wasn't even in the U.S. Senate for 2 complete months, and she found herself immediately a target of an FBI justice and IRS investigation. Well done. Well done, Hill.
Well, I like the idea that Durham is like sitting in his office with printouts of all the PDF documents from Sunday with Charles, watching episode after episode. I hope he becomes a sponsor.
Well, but just going back into the drill a little bit, so Mary Jo White jumps on it. You look in the records, Part 1, Part 2, a lot of activity in February, March, April.
Sorry, Charles, Mary Jo White was what?
The U.S. Attorney for the Southern District in New York. So the person who preceded Comey. So she takes it seriously.
Not on the program, right? Not on
she
the
takes it seriously, and that probably causes folks to say, wait a minute, we got a Mary Jo White problem. And
what
so,
happened to her?
Well, she gets hired away to go work for another firm, a white-collar firm, and make a lot of money, and then 9/11 happens. And 9/11 disrupts things, and then dopey James Crooked Comey goes in to be Mary Jo White's replacement, meeting in the New York office to go over the file And there's a meeting note that you can see in the FBI vault file saying he's excited about following through on this in theory. But in practice, by that date, by December 2001, the Clinton Foundation had never filed a legally compliant audit, had lied about every aspect of its operation, had not registered truthfully to do business anywhere, had not completed the formalities properly, hadn't broken ground on the foundation, hadn't raised that much money, hadn't decided to account using U.S. generally accepted accounting principles, and other than that, was doing a bang-up job.
Yeah, other than that, Charles, how did you like the Presidential Museum?
Yeah. So, which didn't exist then. So Comey hops right on it, and he works in league with Mueller, who joins.
Oh, they're smiling in so many pictures together. They're buddies.
Right. So the two of them get right on this job of missing the Clinton Foundation fraud. And for his excellent job being a monumental, I won't use the Hoist word, I'll just say screw up, Comey gets promoted from being head of the Sovereign District of New York to being the Deputy Attorney General, Rosenstein's job, during the whole hoax.
So here's a question though. To what extent do you expect, and maybe we don't know, but are they call some friend at some fancy law firm and say, offer this Mary Jo White a huge job, so we
probably happens.
Stick Comey in there and make sure 9/11 goes off without a hitch.
Not only that,
don't investigate it.
Not only that, GE was being investigated at that time as well.
And they're back in the news now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So here's a little funny thing. I've been writing it up, so I'm pretty immersed in the details. As people may know, I'm a little bit of a numbers nerd. And so when I see the same unusual number pop up in a lot of different places, you're on 33.
Yeah.
I'm on $11,878,696.
Well, it's a steganographic marker. I see it everywhere.
Well, in this first edition of the Clinton Foundation audit, BKD issues an audit to an entity they describe as William J. Clinton Presidential William J. Clinton Foundation, Inc. There is no such entity on June 9th, 1986. They address it to the board of directors of that entity, which didn't have a board of directors. It had a board of trustees.
Just almost got run over.
It had a board of trustees. And normally when you have, this is the first set of financial statements that in theory had ever been prepared in accordance with what are called U.S. generally accepted accounting principles. Now that may sound like gibberish to you, but it's the accountants get together, specifically the AICPA, the American body, oversight body, and they promulgate with others requirements that are incredibly specific what you have to do. But in simple terms, the first thing you have to do is you have to make sure that you can actually audit something. So if you're going to walk along the street here, you can't audit the amount of trash on this street. Right?
Why not?
Because it's constantly changing. And there's no control over it. Similarly, if you have a company that has no internal controls, is dominated by a dude called Bill Clinton, who collects tens of millions of dollars writing books about his
antics.
Well, about how his public service and how selfless he is. All the while officing himself in a charity that pays his travel expenses and pays for his family. You should right away say, look, this thing is not, we don't have the name right, we don't have the governance right, we haven't established it has articles of incorporation or bylaws or authority to operate outside Little Rock. So we can't write up financial statements for this thing because it doesn't exist. So the decision...
So it's all fake what they submitted?
Well, that's why this is so serious. It's not about, it is in part about illustrating for the rising group of accountants how screwed up these people were on bad math. There is an element of that. But if you wanted to go right to the heart of the issue, as Comey should have done, and as Durham must do, you say, listen, Clinton Foundation, you don't exist. And you've been passing yourself off as a charity when you're not one, you're not even an organization. For that crime, you all are going to prison. Forget the accounting. So that's where I hope Durham is. Durham, the Clinton Foundation, maybe the Times is lying, which does happen frequently, but the article last week published online Thursday and in print Friday claims that they approached the Clinton Foundation and the Clinton Foundation had confirmed that they had received a subpoena. And
The
further,
Clinton Foundation confirmed
Yep.
that they received a subpoena
according to the Times,
from Durham.
from Durham, and that the further that they had complied fully with the subpoena. Now, you know, and the audience may know, and I'm not a lawyer, but I believe I know, that subpoenas get issued when a grand jury authorizes
Right, that's
them.
what I was going to say.
And grand juries get authorized or convene to consider a crime, a specific set of crime, one or more crimes.
Yes.
So that means the Clinton Foundation is either a target or a witness or both.
I would think that they're the target of the investigation. I mean,
Well, we'll see. So for all the naysayers who are saying, well, you know, nothing's going on, you're wasting your time, this is taking more time than we'd hoped,
but if
obviously.
it doesn't happen until after the election, isn't it just going to get totally squashed?
You're assuming that
Right, that's
Biden
true.
is going to win the election.
No,
I think.
I'm not. I'm not assuming
Yeah.
that.
I mean, the way you
But
asked the question.
That's yeah. I mean, I am concerned that they're going to do a lot of crazy stuff with the mail-in ballots. You know, one of my
Can I build?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I just want
No,
to. I
it's
want
okay,
to
it's
just
okay.
keep it on
Yep.
the phone. I hadn't finished the accounting. So we get to the question of whether the thing actually exists, and it doesn't exist as of June 9th, 2006. It didn't have articles of incorporation. It didn't have bylaws, etc. Then we turn to the accounting. Now, a simple thing that you can do with any set of accounts, there's three basic pieces of paper that are out there. One goes through how much you earned and how much you spent. One goes through your net worth at the beginning of the year and your net worth at the end of the year. And then the third goes through the so-called cash flow statement, looks at all your accounts slightly differently and reconciles the movement in cash from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. And there are certain amounts in statements that have to precisely equal one another. An example would be when you think through the pile of assets that are long-term assets, real estate, for example, that you own, the gross value before depreciation.
right.
You compare that value at the beginning of the year to the value at the end of the year, before depreciation. And the difference, assuming there are no divestitures, no sales of property, the difference absolutely has to equal the capital expenditures. There cannot be any variance, right?
Or somebody's stealing something.
Right, and there certainly can't be a variance which happens to be $11,878,696. Then you look at your pile of unpaid bills. Those are called, the current bills that have to be paid in a year or in a period are called accrued expenses and accounts payable.
Right.
And you look at the cash flow statement and they say the balance moved by a certain amount, then you check the balance sheets and you get a different amount, and the difference is $11,878,600.
Seems coincidental.
It's not coincidental. They plug these numbers.
kidding.
Yeah. So, and by the way, this is a beautiful block here.
Yeah, yeah. Where are we on? 20th?
We're on 22nd,
A second.
almost to 8th. But this has been gussied up, gentrified.
Yeah, that's a nice townhouse right here.
I thought that's the American flag.
But I mean, this
I know,
townhouse.
I'm kidding.
I wonder if that's one person or.
So the other thing you have to do, they claim the reason they produced this audit for the first time is that they had changed their accounting principles.
They decided to.
Actually, to try to do them in conformity
Yeah.
with U.S. law. And what they hide is what they really were doing is they were declaring for the first time that they'd had activities prior to 2004 that resulted in $15.5 million in net income that has never been explained.
Like who gave it to them or whatever?
Right, it's probably HIV and AIDS work, and we don't know how much the revenues were for that. We don't know how much the expenses were. We don't know how much related party payments were. But the one thing we do know is they don't, in this audit, account for it properly. So you start there and you say there's this large difference that shouldn't be there, the 11,878, 696. It appears all over the place. Then you discover activities that had happened in 2003 that were not previously disclosed, which have never been accounted for with a 990, a report to the IRS, or in a report to all the states where they solicited and spent money. So that's a problem. Then you say, all right, let's forgive those problems for a second and see if there's anything here that we can maybe hang our hat on and get right. Then you discover,
Even the zoo tickets.
Yeah.
Anything.
So you go in, and remember, this is an audit that has remained outstanding, notwithstanding 265 videos, umpty-ump television interviews, radio interviews, print jobs, since March 2015.
The Breitbart article.
Everything that I've done, they have not tried to change this because they know if they did, they'd have to just report to prison.
So what do you mean, if they changed it, that would, what? That would indicate that they acknowledge it or something?
Well, the problem is if you file something that is false, the 990, which
And
all
you've
the
signed it saying under penalty of
right,
perjury.
it's out there false, and the audit is also false, you haven't complied with the requirement, which means that you're not a public charity, which means that
Everything goes down.
everything goes down the rental, which is why this should be put into conservatorship, in my view, immediately, yesterday. So, but wait, it gets worse.
There's more.
It gets worse. So do you want to go down 8th or?
I'm not liking that radio array up there.
Okay, keep going.
Yeah.
So
I forget where our destination is.
we're trying to get, we want to show people the 6th precinct,
Oh, yes, right.
which is down on 10th Street.
That's an interesting looking cat, huh?
You're into animals today, cats, dogs,
Well,
next thing you
I
know, we'll
don't-
see rats.
I don't usually see a lot of cats out on the street.
Yeah. So then you go through and you do this, you start with 2005 and you discover there's all sorts of problems at the 2005 balance sheet. So then you try to correct that by going and using the numbers that they disclose. You reverse the cash flows for 2004 against the year-end balance sheet for 2004. That gives you an estimated balance sheet year-end 2003. And you realize it and say, wait a minute, holy shit. They're claiming that they borrowed $28.5 million in 2004, in 2003, when they actually borrowed it in February 20th, 2004.
Who are they borrowing this from?
Bank of America, 26.5.
Why does a charity need to borrow that much money?
Well, you're not allowed to borrow money for a charity, as a charity, unless it's for your authorized purposes, which back then were building the building, and they didn't need money to build the building. They had more than enough money, as I'll tell you in a second.
So why did they need that?
They committed a bank fraud because 2004, in my view, well, it certainly was a campaign year, and Terry McAuliffe was chairman of the National Committee of the Democratic Party. They needed money, so they created a revolving line of credit of $26.5 million, which could likely have been used to finance campaigns. And so there are records of the loan application, the loan drawdown, the loan repayments, who made representations, what was the name of the entity that borrowed the money. Smaller loan for $1.98 million, but those sums add up to $28.479 million. That money was stolen, it was diverted. As was, and this we've been through before, the 990, the IRS form, characterizes a grant to the National Archives of $36 million as a cash expense, when in fact it was a non-cash expense. So that means they falsely stated how much cash they had and stole $36 million, a further $36 million. So you add it all up, they stole about $65 million bucks, 64 point change, and that's a lot more than the loan that they had borrowed.
Right.
The two loans, right? So they clearly didn't need those two loans, and the loans had stated purposes. When you go to a bank and you say, I need money.
Yeah, they don't just give it out.
Well, and if you take the money and you use it for a purpose that is not the
Something else,
purpose, that's fraud.
Right.
And if you're doing that potentially across state lines, which maybe they were, it's federal
So why
fraud.
the hell did they do that? Charles, Lamborghini, why'd you park over here?
So that's my dusty one. I didn't want people to see it.
But wait a minute, so why did they do all this? Do you know, or can you speculate?
The Democratic Party needed money in 2004.
So all that fraud, I mean, can't they just raise funds? They're the Clintons.
Come on. It's more fun to steal it.
That's crazy to me. I mean,
Now, do you want to go down this or 10th?
whichever.
You tell me.
This is good.
We haven't gone down this
Yeah,
one.
yeah, let's check it out.
Yeah.
So
So you can see that. So they on that they stole 64.8 million or thereabouts during and after 2004, and they failed to correct any of this, to give the money back, or to disclose properly what had actually happened. And I say maybe 64 because one key trick in any audit in any company is if you have horrific controls and you've got Bill Clinton with a fancy office in Harlem, in a penthouse overlooking Central Park, entertaining grifters and heads of state, but I'm repeating myself. Who knows how much money was sent towards the Clinton Foundation? There's a press release in July of 2003 claiming that the government of Ireland was going to give the William Jefferson Clinton HIV/AIDS initiative over 130 million bucks. There are press releases from Australia and Norway and many other countries saying they gave a lot of money. If instead of sending that money actually to the Clinton Foundation, you're sending it to an account that nobody monitors from BKD because they're born stupid and crooked, evidently, who knows how much money actually went towards the Clinton Foundation. That's why I say, if I can look at this with others without access to the internal papers of the Clinton Foundation, I've never had a single internal paper, no bank account records, no correspondence.
Public domain stuff.
All from the public domain. WikiLeaks had some documents that were internal to the Clinton Foundation, but a real FBI group, that same group that knocked down Manafort's door and Corsi's door, and those type of people, not only can they vacuum up all the records of the foundation, but they can use the amazing power of FinCEN, the Treasury Department, and others to track down any bank account connected to the Clinton Foundation. The organizations, the trustees, the executives, you can get all sorts of stuff done. And you can do it quickly. You can also get, instead of just
moving truck down there.
Yeah. Instead of year-end statements alone, you can get monthly statements, you can get bank wires.
And within seconds, they just tap on a computer and have it.
And so, I think the revelation that indeed Durham has been looking, and his team have been looking at this for months, squares with my experience looking at it from the outside. When you start pulling on the string and you say, the original audit is wrong, that means every subsequent audit is wrong, that means all the disclosures are wrong, that means Bill Gates and a lot of other supposedly smart people gave lots of money to an obvious fraud. There's a lot to consider here.
Yeah.
And if you want to send a rough message to the swamp, you don't just tag somebody with a $2 million fine or a $3 million fine and put them in prison for 4 years. You go to Harvard and Yale and Gates Foundation, a whole bunch of charities, and you say, we want you to go out of business. You're not a charity.
Well, that's just it. I think that needs to happen en masse, Charles. They're talking about raising taxes. How about cracking down on some of these tax-exempt organizations, so many of which seem to be fraudulent?
Well, I think that what's interesting, when I started on this in 2015, even though I had done something similar with GE, people said, you're taking on the Clintons, and you have a death wish here.
Right.
And it wasn't accepted wisdom that the Clinton Foundation was a fraud. Now, anytime their name gets back into the news, it trends on Twitter.
Well, and also somewhere in Arkansas, they're saying, you're taking on Charles Ortel. Do you have a death wish here?
I don't know about that. So, the other thing just to mention is that for people who are not familiar with the accounting profession,
it's an interesting and good view of a Barry Diller thing.
Yeah. If you're generally not familiar with the accounting profession, accountants have to not only pass very tough tests, but they have to do continuing education, and they do owe a duty to the public. So when they
certified public accountant.
Right. So when they see a presidential charity that is strayed far from its authorized principles, hiding massive diversion and public benefit, private benefit to the Clinton family and other trustees and grifters around the Clinton Foundation, when they see all that happening for a long number of years, and instead of doing something about it, saying, well, I'll tell you what, I'm not going to report all this if you hike my fee.
Right.
Then you tend to get your ass kicked.
Yeah, because you're complicit.
Right. And we pile on BKD, and I well understand why the smaller accounting firm would look at the Clinton opportunity and say, wow, we can go from being a Midwestern firm with
to being in jail.
To coming to New York to the Clinton Global Initiative and meeting heads of state.
It's seductive.
And I understand why they fall for it. But I don't understand why Price Waterhouse would fall for it, although they're the people who couldn't get the Academy Awards right that year.
Yeah, I just think that, it doesn't matter how big they are, they're just...
And Cohn Resnick which is the firm that's currently auditing, or was until recently, I don't know if they still are, auditing the Clinton Foundation. These are firms that need to be regulated by what are called the Accounting Standards Board in whatever state they're domiciled. So Cohn-Resnick is doing audits in New Jersey and New York for the Clinton Foundation, which doesn't exist as a public charity. And they're being paid a lot of money to do that. They need to be disciplined. And any accountant can, I think even any member of the public can complain to the local standards board about this. Beyond that, where are the U.S. attorneys? What are they doing?
Yeah.
Where do you want to go?
I don't know. Well, but this is kind of jammed up here in front of Google. Maybe we should cross the street.
Yeah, we can go across the street.
I was just looking at the Budokan night market, Charles.
That's where you generally hang out, right?
I don't think so, but I don't know what it is. I think Budokan is a gigantic club and restaurant.
Well, there's the Buddha bar.
And now they're relegated to this tiny little outdoor space. And then here's Google doing some construction or something.
That's a big building.
Yeah, it is. This used to be, I think, the Port Authority building or something like that. Yeah, it says New York Port Authority right on it. So,
Yeah, they.
where'd they go?
There are rumors afoot that there'll be an antitrust suit brought against to break up Google in the next several weeks.
I think that would make sense.
Should.
Have the search be one thing and the YouTube be another thing. I don't know, but it's like a tech company. They're going to break it up. What's that going to do?
Yeah. I got to believe the folks who sold YouTube at the time for what seemed like a lot of money, they must be, unless they took stock in Google, they must be.
I think they worked for Google.
Do they really?
I don't know. It always occurs to me that if you sell something to somebody for $1 billion, it's hard to get upset about that, even if.
Well, when it comes back being worth 100 billion years, well,
I mean, but still, it just seems to me, if you had $1 billion, are you ever going to spend that? I think maybe perhaps I'm thinking about it differently than.
No, I just think people would you'd regret the fact that you did it. But anyway, so there's a set of accounting problems that Durham should be able to spot starting in the beginning, meaning that all future audits are wrong. But there's another simple approach. If you look up and you look at the descriptions that every accounting firm has made of every Clinton charity, they all omit a crucial fact. And that crucial fact is that this is not a 501c3 alone. This is a special type of 501c3 called a public charity that has tighter requirements than a 501c3 that has to be met.
Aren't most of them public charities?
No.
Look at that.
Homestead?
Yeah, they have outdoor tables now.
Wow.
So,
this is, tell people where we are, this is Meatpacking District?
Yeah, we've been down here a couple times. Meatpacking District, we just walked past Chelsea Market and Google. We got,
I think if we head that way,
Sure.
we'll get to the precinct.
Well, but so wait a minute, so
These are public charities, which means specifically they cannot be controlled by a family. And the bylaws that were secretly, I would say, amended on November 2nd, I think it was, 2013, and then amended again on September 10th, 2015. Those bylaws attempt to concentrate can we cross or not?
I think we should wait. It looks like they're about to go. So the bylaws are concentrated?
Concentrate the authority of the trustees into the hands of what are called Class A trustees or Class A directors. Not only do they have super voting powers at board meetings, but in between board meetings, they control all aspects of the operation of the foundation, in theory, and any action taken outside a board meeting is not subject to the review of trustees, which is ridiculous. I mean, you can't do that.
I think a lot of people don't know what any of this means. It's like so complicated.
So I'll try to help you. You go back over it. I mean, when you create a public charity, you've got to create something separate from Jason Goodman and Charles Hertel, something that we don't dominate, something that actually has an essence that stands independent from us, is out there, independent from our business lives, our personal lives, our political lives, etc. And so there are various ways you can do that under the law. One is you create what are called articles of incorporation that comply with state law. And state law on nonprofit corporations is very strict. It requires that you really truly have an independent board of directors, that you have empowered officers, regular meetings, books of account, outlaws conflicts, no partisan political activities, and on and on and on. So those are the basic requirements. But when you go and you say, I'm not just going to do a basic little company, I'm going to do the toughest type of company to do a public charity, that's when they say, you can't run a public charity that used to be called the William J. Clinton Presidential Foundation because it was a research center and archive in Little Rock, as instead a fancy office for Bill, Hillary, and Chelsea to hire their friends so they don't have to hire them out of their personal pockets, which is very expensive. And you, instead of basing it in Little Rock, you're going to have it in New York in a suite of different offices. You can't do that. It's strictly
But yet they
forbidden.
did.
Right. And so the Durham charge here and the Barr charge, and frankly the Trump charge here, you can't let this off with a little slap on the wrist. You see this in New York. You let people start doing this to buildings,
Yeah.
burning down things.
It doesn't get better.
Exactly. It draws more aggressive people. You let fraudsters understand that former presidents who get really high on life, on the fancy life,
And other things.
and decide that they need money to subsidize this fancy
Ooh,
lifestyle.
God. That
Nice?
stinks.
You like that?
Roasting garbage.
Eau de garbage.
Oh.
Or as it's pronounced here in New York, garbage. But
These presidents get high on life, Charles.
right, but you let this example stand, and bad as the Clinton Foundation is, imagine how much worse the Obama Foundation is going to become. I mean, it's been around since 2014 for 6 years. It doesn't have a building yet.
But I also would add, I don't think it's just the foundation, Charles. It's the brazen overall activity of the Obama crew. Like they say, he's thinking to himself, oh, well, the Clintons aren't the president anymore, but yet they're doing all this criminal stuff.
Right.
I could set it up so that I could be my own little,
Right.
Obama mafia.
Exactly, Obamafia.
Obama mafia, exactly.
Yeah. But
Perfect.
yeah, and so that's why Barr and Trump and Durham really have to do something. I was mentioning something severe here. They have to punish
agree.
not merely the Clintons and not merely the banksters and lawyers and accountants, but the donors. I mean, the real deal here is that when you're president of the United States and our governments all in are spending close to $7 trillion before the pandemic per year, $7 trillion, you have the ability to make or break companies by private contractors, by contracts to private contractors, by enforcing the law